Hello and welcome to Fintech Focus TV with me, Toby Babb. And today I am delighted to be joined in our latest of the COVID series with Simon Swords from Fundipedia. Simon, how are you?
Good afternoon. I'm very good. The sun is shining. The world is starting to rotate again, and you know, you never know. We might be back to normal in about a year, whatever that looks like. So yeah, I'm decent.
We're edging there. We're edging there.
Yeah. So.
And you're right. There's there's sort of more and more shoots that are sort of returning to it. So fingers crossed we'll be back in some sort of normality in the not too distant future. Listen, before we go into the business at hand, let's hear a little bit more about your background and Fundipedia. Fascinating business, focused on the investment management space. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Dean and I, who I co-founded the business with, we started it back in 2007 in a shed, actually, in my parents' garden. Like all good startups, you should be cold and uncomfortable. Otherwise, you're doing it wrong, right? You can't have a nice, adjustable chair at the outset. I think we were both perched on bits of wood or whatever, and we were just good at identifying. Like, we didn't know how good we were at the time, because you don't. I'm 37 now, so I was about 25 then, and Dean's a bit younger than me. He was about 22, 23 then, and he was just a fantastic, and still is, a fantastic coder. And I'm very good at going into clients and earning their trust and having them say to me, hey, this is our problem. And so we both worked together at a very large law firm, and we solved a problem that they'd been wrestling with for years together. We weren't supposed to. Dean was, employed to change toner cartridges in printers, and I was there as a, generic IT manager, very, overseeing a little bit of P&L and, some vendor supply chain management and all of that. But they were struggling with one of these vendors, and I said to one of the partners, look, we can fix this problem for you guys if you want. I think Dean's a fantastic coder. Why don't we give him a shot? And lo and behold, we didn't just build a system. We built a system so good that they started reselling it to their competitors. And I found out after they cut me a check one Christmas, which was not their style. They were like, hey, here's a bonus, but we just need you to sign this. And I was like, okay, well, I'll take the money, but and it's only after I kind of stepped in, I was like, oh, you son of a gun, you're actually, okay, what are you trying to do? Yeah. So took Dean down the pub, like all great business outings, and basically said to him, look, we can carry on making these chumps a load of money, and that's going to be the story, whether you like it or not. Here or any other organisation, you're going to be adding a level of value that you're not going to be, compensated in accordance with, because you will be paid by the hour. And it's now advice that I give to anyone, really. Like, where you can, try not to earn money by the hour, because there's only so many hours in a week, right? And it's very unlikely you're going to earn £1,000 an hour unless you're a super expensive lawyer or whatever. So you naturally limit the amount of money you make when you work. But what you want to do is generate value. And it sounds very like an Americanism, because it kind of is, but generate money while you sleep, So not really knowing what that looked like, and because Dean, bless him, had probably a bit more faith in me than you should have at the time, because I certainly didn't know what I was doing. He understood my point, and he said, well, look, I'm young, you're young, let's have a crack at it. So we left there, and we started a Atlas Computer Systems, and it was a generic software development company run by two people with absolutely no business being in business. I would go to every federation of small businesses, every you name it, those horrible BMI things where you got to get up at 6:30 in the morning to network. Yeah. You know the ones.
I've heard of it.
Never actually got up for it. The breakfast isn't that good, don't bother. That's what they get you in on, and I'm a sucker for food. And various other networking meetings, and we basically went out, and the gig was that I would make promises, and Dean would then work with me, because I can code too, I don't anymore, but and we would sit there until whatever hour in the morning, actually building the system that I'd sold. And one day we had an asset management company come to us, and they said, we want a system to help manage our data. And this was like back in 2008, 2009. They were well ahead of the curve, just post the echo. Oh, that was the other thing, by the way. We started it right in the middle of the world's largest global recession in my life. So that was a challenge.
Up until now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, indeed. So we they came to us and they said, look, operationally, we've got all of this static data around funds and share classes and various other bits and pieces we're doing. And she's got a spreadsheet and he's got a spreadsheet and they've got a spreadsheet. And we've got some people banging on our door asking for this information and we're struggling to put it together. And we've got other people who just internally have recognised that when they want to run a report and understand what products we're selling, it takes 15 man or woman days to pull this thing together, and it's just an operational headache. And they're a super, they're now called 91. Obviously, they've just recently rebranded, but they've always been super efficient. They get done with a head count what other companies with double, triple would struggle to do, based on my experience. And we still work with them to this day. Anyway, built this thing for them, and realised that there was the potential for it to, be used in other asset management firms, and it was. But it's been a long, slow journey, and I'll be honest, it's only in the last 4 or 5 years that, rather than us having to reach out to companies and say, hey, can we chat to you about some of your operational efficiencies and how data might be something that you should be taking seriously? It's only with the advent of more kind of heavy-handed regulatory reporting, the proliferation of data, the fact that they can't, their margins are being squeezed, so they can't really afford to sit there and just hire more people either in the UK or abroad to munge the data into something that's good. And moreover, I think the regulators are starting to get a little bit hacked off with certain asset management, the asset management firms not taking seriously enough some of the problems that exist when you don't have your data in order. A combination of all of those things, margins being squeezed, more regulation, more data than ever, is forcing them to seriously reconsider, yes, it's unsexy, yes, it's not very exciting, but my goodness, maybe if we just had our data in order, what can we do with it? And so as a result of the market now turning on its head, we're starting to see people come to us. And then more recently, we've had the Investment Association come to us, and we joined that just last year. But they run a cohort every year. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's like a Fintech. Yeah. Used to call Velocity. They rebranded it to Engine. And off the back of that, we applied, thinking it felt like a bit like we felt like the granddads in a room, in a sense, purely because we've been going for about a decade. So we thought, well, we're not really like, this is an accelerator. But I think the world is different now, in that accelerators used to be only for startups, but they can also be for scale up.
Definitely. And
I think that's what they recognised. And when we turned up, they were like, you guys are banging the drum that we know we should be banging too. And so they awarded us a place in this year's cohort along for.
Oh, it's fantastic. Yeah.
And I think that is the ultimate kind of hat tip to 2020 being now a platform upon which we do intend to use that velocity. And if you'll excuse the pun, but
works deliciously.
The industry is now and now that the industry is recognising that data is such an important thing. It's not just a question of let's get your data in order. There's so many other cool things that we can do with it, which we'll come on into in a bit. But where the business now is, we're about 25 odd employees. We got a range of really super interesting, super cool clients. And given the vantage point that we've got, we know that data proliferation issues are just rampant in asset management. They're rampant in all businesses, not just to pick on asset management. They're rampant across many, many verticals. But our chosen, or it was kind of chosen by us because Investec reached out all those years ago, our chosen industry is asset management, and we're now running around solving as many kind of data headaches as we can for them. Fundipedia was the cornerstone of that, but it's now much wider than that.
Spreading further, and it's an interesting time, as you sort of say there, because look, data is data's been the buzzword for a number of years now, and traditionally the asset investment management space has been fairly slow to adopt with some of those areas. But look, this is also now a time of massive scale where data becomes and remote working becomes even more significant, a threat and an opportunity. What's the market saying at the moment? What's your take on everything right now?
Yeah, no, sure. So what's the market saying? The market is saying that they need to start thinking about the next generation of wealth coming through, right? So you know, the age-old days of being able to sell products through IFAs, institutionally, that type of thing, being able to just lollop around a little bit. You've got your product portfolio, put it out there and kind of sell it at an industrial level, you know, institutionally, is changing. You know, and it's changing not necessarily yet as a result of changes in asset management itself. It's funnily enough, it's changing as a result of changes that we're seeing around like retail banking. You know, I could now, using this bad boy, create myself a bank account in about a minute, right? So long, even that we've got used to, right? Monzo and the various other challenger banks coming through are starting to really see, really prove to, you know, what is otherwise quite archaic, but you know, the banking industry, that you can do things with data and APIs and joined up thinking and modern technology like this, and you can go direct to the end consumer. And the asset management firms are going to have to follow. You know, they're going to have to start creating products that are attractive to millennials. And millennials don't go to IFAs, they go online. And millennials aren't going to read fact sheets and kids. They're going to do their own investment research in a way that isn't the way that we've always done it. And any firm that hasn't got their data in order isn't going to understand that, because they're going to be too busy meeting, you know, you've got this split really where you've got to do enough regulatory data management. I mean, and that's a very broad term for all of the MiFID, EMT, EPT, you know, the stuff that you just have to do takes time. And if you haven't got that automated and in a state that it is just, that's part of our BAU, you're going to be too busy staying up to date with the regulators to even think about how are we going to sell our products, our funds, to the next generation of individuals. And the super smart banks, the banks that are really starting to understand it, look to places like WeChat. So WeChat, and it's an odd kind of, what? Like WeChat's you know about WeChat?
Yeah.
So what's interesting is what's going on in Asia with WeChat is there's like a walled garden, if you like, of technology stacks. And what WeChat started out as was a simple messaging platform, a bit like WhatsApp. But what it's manifested into, as you probably already know, is like it's WeChat is a chat platform. You can buy stuff on it. It's a bit like, it's got a bit of Amazon in it. It's got a bit of Facebook in it. It's got a bit of banking in it. And imagine all of that data in one database. Imagine what an investor or an asset management company would know about a potential investor, an end client like me and you, based on you know how much they get paid every month, you know what they spend their money on, you know, because of where they spend their money, what types of things that they, you know, do they buy cigarettes or not? You know, do they spend money on alcohol? Do they, where do they like to hang out? Who do they like to hang out with? Because guess what? I can see who you're connected to as well. So I don't just know about you.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Oh man, the amount of data, so that's like data squared or to the power of n, you know what I mean? Like, and when you've got that level of understanding, you can then you can work back from that to create products that appeal to, you know, almost each person. Now, I'm not saying that's where we are at the moment. Obviously, that's a fantastic level of detail that you get down into, but that's where it's going to go. So companies like Goldman Sachs and others, and I think JP Morgan just the last few days launched an interactive platform that you can now switch money into Bitcoin and back, right? All of these, and people thought, oh, you know, Bitcoin's just a trend, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, maybe it is, and maybe Bitcoin will ultimately go away. Put that to one side. What's ultimately going to happen is that clever, smart companies are going to look at the WeChat model and they're going to acquire businesses. I mean, you could never buy Amazon, you know, and you probably can't afford to buy back Facebook, but you can afford to think about the data that's held in their silos and how you might be able to use it. And chances are the big banks will do JVs with companies like Amazon. And it wouldn't, you know, I'm kind of surprised actually that Amazon hasn't got more into banking yet.
Well, it's been pushing towards it, hasn't it?
Yeah, and Mr. Bezos and all of that, one of the things he's quite passionate about is API drip. That's how AWS spun up, right? You know that backstory?
Yeah.
He said to all of his staff.
I was literally reading about it just now. So.
Oh, it's amazing, right? And I read about it years ago, so I'm going to paraphrase it and you'll probably fill in my gaps. But basically he said, you've got all your, in Amazon, we've got all of our systems in a silo. And I'm sure he didn't put it quite like this, but he basically said, if I find out that any one of you has built another new system and it hasn't got an API that interrupts with all the other areas of the business, I'm going to fire you, right? We will no longer have silos in our business. Everything will interrupt. And then obviously a big part of their business is web hosting because of the nature of their beast. And because they built it all so well and API driven and fundamentally the tech was good, all they had to do, and I'm sure there's more twist than that, was give it a name, Amazon Web Services, flick a button, turn it on to the outside world, boom, new revenue stream, you know. So Amazon is almost certainly geared up if they chose to move into another industry. So
well, their sort of diversification from a bookseller through to what they've become has been extraordinary, right? And so it would naturally be a progression for them.
Yeah, indeed. And unlike other companies, Tesla, Jeff seems to have kept his hat on, you know, and not lost it. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like he seems
expensive divorces aside.
Well, indeed, and you know, there, but for the grace of God go I. You know, like we're all capable of, you know, finding ourselves in situations where you have issues like that, and so I'm not going to comment pro or against that. However, yeah, you know, like, but even that, and that was a bit of a scandal, but he's obviously got some good PR people around him because he did, I think, limp off with some other woman and it was a little bit complicated, but ultimately found himself, you know, at the other side of it without a Twitter storm and, you know, devaluing his stock by a few billion. So smart guy, obviously switched on. And I think when you think about a business model, the asset management, you know, what's your take on the asset management space? Well, my take on the asset management space is fundamentally that they are too busy treading water. And those that don't start to sort themselves out and automate the stuff, you know, and I'm a little bit biased because obviously Fundipedia is one of those platforms that will help them to sort that stuff out. Mm-hmm. I don't care, you know, the moment I go into an asset management firm and I find out that any element of it, whether it's their dynamic data, their feeds in from the third-party administrators or their static data, you know, their product reference data or whatever it is, if there's a spreadsheet in sight, you are so far away from where you need to be to start servicing that new generation of people that are going to come through and expect so much more of you than has ever been expected of you as an industry, that you've got some serious running to do. And best you start running in the right direction. And like I say, Goldman Sachs are the ones, you know, some of the acquisitions they're making, they're building the pillars out in order to ensure that they've got the data that they need to build the products that the next generation of people will start to invest in, because that generation of people also cares about things like ESG, you know, and other, you've got to build, like, they are not just going to put money into businesses that have great returns, you know, they're going to put money into businesses that are sustainable, you know, things like, you heard of the B Corp, which is B Corp is like a bit like an ISO, but for being a good company, you know. Okay. So they assess you on things like sustainable business practices, everything from, and I'm pointing over there because I'm pointing at it, have you got a recycle bin in the office? Yeah. You don't just dump everything, and, you know, as basic as that, all the way through to what are your employment processes, how do you vet staff, how do you look after staff, do you give staff the option to take an option in the business if that's a thing that you can I own a little bit of the business? Are you building something that is going to be around in 50 years' time and is a net positive for the earth, you know, both people and planet? So people are going to want that in where they're investing their money, you know. They're going to shy away from the petroleum companies and the tobacco companies and the mining companies, and they're going to start thinking about renewable energy and putting money in those products and products that are geared up for their generation. And you can only build those products if you've got the data and the understanding of your client base to build it for them, you know, and not just running manually client reporting and all that.
That's fascinating stuff, isn't it? And it's and I think it's a pivotal time for for that industry. I'm just going to get sort of tangent off slightly because you mentioned recycling bins and offices there, and I know you've been running in your COVID Confession series, the sort of perils of working from home and all that sort of stuff. You made yourself a bit of a online viral sensation through all of this over recent weeks.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
So you're in the office. You're in the office at the moment, are you?
Yeah, no, I'm quite fortunate really that in my own little bubble we've been able to kind of limp along. Well, I've certainly, me personally, my office is 5 minutes up the road from where I live. Right.
There you go.
So in order to sustain a somewhat happy marriage, because you've got to bear in mind, those videos my wife is editing, right? So poor woman, she has to sit there staring at my horrible face on the Apple iMac or whatever, And then I come home and she's like, it's you again.
You again.
Yeah. So the last thing she needs is double vision and having me there, like both in physical form and on the computer. So yeah, no, the COVID confessional was an interesting one, and funnily enough, I ran the idea past people, and because we put that video out there about 5 or 6 weeks ago, and my wife Leanne at the time said, are you sure we're at a stage where you can say COVID confessional? You know, people are dying, Si. Like, this is a really serious topic, and you say COVID confessional like it's not a joke, but like you're potentially going to be perceived as using it as a marketing piece, and you know, we're still all terrified of it at that point. But I had the debate with her, as I often do, and on this occasion, which is a rare one, I was right. It wasn't about making light of the COVID situation at all. It was about, let's find mechanisms in which we can produce good from bad, which I think ultimately people are good at.
Yeah.
Right. And the only way to produce, in my view, good from bad, or not the only way, but one of the best ways, is to say, what is it that I was doing wrong before this crisis hit, that I can take ownership of on a very personal level and own, and how can I make other people comfortable with, you know, putting their potential wrongs right too. Well, you do that by being honest about what you got wrong and potentially what you're going to do right going forward. And I think it's very interesting because, you know, so my COVID confessional, for those that didn't see the video, was that we'd implemented a work from home policy, but only because I felt it was the right thing to do, and not because I was properly bought into it. You know,
yeah. I'll level with you. Now we're confessing. I'm in a very, very similar sort of state of mind with that. So it was, I think I probably lived in exactly the same shoes as yours in that spot.
Yeah, and you know what? I can justify it to a point, but then when I had a gun, you know, the virtual gun held to my head, I think it was around the 23rd of March, the lockdown happened, obviously, and everyone got kicked out of the offices. And I kind of had to jump in with both feet. And about a week after we'd kind of jumped in with both feet, I remember just sitting at home thinking, you idiot. You know, what a stupid thing to have been so scared of. And given that you keep telling everyone, and this is the truth, you know, how great your team is, and how hardworking and trustworthy they all are, how small-minded of you to have been so anti letting them have this amount, like, and you know, I'll double down on my confessional, why not? I had the flexibility myself. I can work from wherever I want, right? No one's ever going to come up to me and say, Simon, where were you yesterday? Like, so I had all of the upside of flexible work. Like, we had flexible working, like people could choose their hours and come and go. But I was the only one who could truly say, I'm going to spend this morning sitting at home in my pants, typing up a memo or whatever, right? No one else in the business had that. So I was taking all of the benefit of it myself and knew that it worked for me. I like to think all of my team are like-minded like I am. They're hardworking and trustworthy individuals that just want to do a good job and keep our clients happy. And I didn't extend it to them. What a idiot. So, you know, so I fixed it. I was forced to fix it. And that's kind of the crunch of the confessional, really. Like, it's not like I woke up one morning and went, do you know what? I'm going to go all out and I'm just going to try it and hopefully, you know, live by the sword, die by the sword type thing. I was forced to do it. And only afterwards was I like, oh man, it worked. But what a great thing.
Yeah, it's positives from negatives, as you say. What stopped you beforehand? What was your reticence of doing that?
I think the same thing that stops a lot of people doing a lot of things, unfortunately. It's a lack of confidence, and it's not necessarily a lack of confidence in my team. It's a lack of confidence in my ability to manage my team remotely. And what would it look like? Is it going to be chaos? Are we going to have, you know, I don't know. I just had images of it being completely bananas. You know, and I think also actually, and here's another aspect to it, just to take the heat off myself a little bit, I suppose. Some of my staff wouldn't have wanted to work from home, even if I give them the option. But only now that they're forced to, they see the upside of it too. So yeah, it was a complete lack of confidence on my part that I could make it work, and it certainly wasn't a technological issue at all. It was am I going to get stuff done for my clients to the same level of? Are we going to deliver software solutions and the associated consultancy to my clients at the same rate, at the same level of quality? Are my team going to feel that they're still part of our culture is incredibly good. You know, Dean and I, again, when we worked for that firm before, the managers there were awful. And for the first kind of couple of years of running Atlas, we said, whenever we had like a HR or a cultural issue, we were like, well, what would our previous employer have done? Oh, yes, we'll do the opposite. So that only gets you so far, right? But we spent so many years building such a fantastic culture. I suppose I was also nervous that the culture would start to dissipate. And one of the things, you know, for all the things that we can talk about positively about the remote working culture, and I will add, actually, we hired 2 people during lockdown that I've yet to meet, you know, which is incredible. But you've only got to look to companies like GitLab. I mean, GitLab is $1 billion company, and they are 100% remote. And yes, they're a techie company, so you could argue they're geared up for it, but they make it work. They do retreats and all of that stuff. And so people that, you know, it's like nice that people have been forced into remote working, and it's nice that a lot of companies are going to take it forward, but I think it's going to require additional leaps of faith. So, and I'll just use one example off the top of my head. We're probably going to lose half of our office space over the next couple of years. Certainly when one of our leases comes up, we probably won't renew it, because there won't be the need for it, because we won't need to have people in the office. And then what you've got to start thinking is, well, how do you maintain the culture as you move forward? Because you built it up by being in the same room. We get pizzas in on people's birthdays. You know, when somebody's been here 10 years, we'll do a little shindig for them. We've only been going 12 years. We've just had a year or two ago, one person was 10 years in, and we did a big thing for them, and we'll do another. And obviously we always do stuff to catch up with each other over Christmas and that. But what else is it that you're going to do in order to kind of maintain a culture? And one of the things I've been thinking about doing is taking the money that we used to spend, or will have used to be spending on rent once we shut a bit of the office down, and putting that into a fund that is the culture fund. And saying, this is money that we get to blow on doing stuff, whether it be escape rooms, whether it be little holidays, get an Airbnb somewhere in the Highlands or whatever, that we use to create relationships that we used to spend on having an office that created, you know, we used to create a relationship by being in the same space. That's not the case anymore. So now that money will be reinvested from what used to be office rent into a culture fund. And that's something that I've been toying with.
It's really interesting, isn't it? It's because that's the big piece about how you keep people interconnected. I mean, you mentioned there the 2 people you've brought into the business, and how they sort of build those relationships, you know, with people across the team, and how they're going to know, you know, the people who they're working with on a daily basis. And then I look at it and think, right, okay, there are bonds forming with our US office who've never met any of the guys in the UK. And they still feel part of the one. So I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff that comes out of this, and some challenges. Let's focus in on those. So you've got 2 people in your company now, and a company that sounds like it's been very close knit to date, who you've not physically met.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
So not physically met. You've taken them through the process. What are the learns you've had from that?
Actually, you don't need to meet people to build relationships. So one of our guys lost someone very close to them shortly after they joined, one of those 2 people. And so I catch up with my senior management team once a fortnight, and it's a silly little thing really, but it felt like the right thing to do. We sent them a card, like condolences, sorry for your loss type thing. And this guy who I've not met yet, I mean, I'd said hello to him on Teams and all of that, but he got the card, and he obviously had a bit of time off bereavement, rightly so. And, well, you know, he actually wanted to come back a lot sooner, like a lot of people, right? You throw yourself into a bit of work, so because what are you going to do otherwise, especially during the lockdown? And he sent me a really nice message saying, so happy to be a part of a company that treats, you know, people you don't even know that kindly. You know, send them a silly card and a condolences from all the team. But I think that's one of the important things that we're going to have to do. You know, it's just about, I think what remote working forces you to do is just to be a bit more thoughtful. Another thing was that I found out that one of our guys, 2 of our guys in fact, had worked late. I found out from our head of service delivery, and she just mentioned it. She was like, oh, you know, these 2 guys, there was an issue on one of our, we've got, Fundipedia is our mainstay, but we've got a couple of other products that generate a bit of residual revenue for us. And there's a little bug on one of them, and it's a bit of a pain, but they both stayed up late last night and fixed it. And so I said, you know, why don't we buy them dinner? Sounds like they missed out on dinner with their family. I mean, you know, pay them overtime as well if you want, but like the thought process should be, what can we do over and above just financials? So I said, tell them that next time they order in takeout, or, I mean, and at the time we thought the restaurants were going to reopen, but that clearly hasn't happened, and it won't be for a while. But, you know, buy them dinner. You know, they're both guys. We can't send them flowers. We could send them chocolates, and that would be nice, but whatever. Buy them dinner. They've got, you know, 100 quid each or whatever they want to spend on a really nice takeout. And I think you just need to get creative, you know, the same way that I was talking about how we create a culture fund. You just got to start thinking about mechanisms. So every Friday night we play Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know the first thing about playing Dungeons and Dragons. I should do. I am a software company, right? It should have been my mainstay as a kid, but it wasn't. But one of our guys is really, he's a dungeon master now, obviously. And he set up his story. And every Friday night at 8 o'clock, we all sit around. I don't know what they're doing, but I normally drink half a bottle of wine or whatever. And we chat. And it's like group storytelling. Right? I didn't even know how you play it, but it's basically group storytelling. And that brings the team together. And people want to be involved in that. We're going to set up online. I didn't know this either, but you can do, on some of the poker websites, you can have a private room.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Didn't know that. So we're going to do a Zoom and poker night. And, you know, it's those types of things, I think. And to be honest, they're actually easier than messing around running an office. Running an office is a right pain in the bum. You know? So actually, you know, the big takeaway from the remote working, you know, this seminal moment in remote working and the change in people just don't want to go to London anymore. Not everyone, but a lot of people won't want to. The seminal moment will be for the commercial landlords.
Yeah.
And how they continue to monetize what has been a very tidy little income for a very long time. They've now, you know, and when you think about these, you know, over in Canary Wharf, these massive, massive buildings, you know, it'd be very...
Well, you're hearing big companies already talk about that. Barclays and their 7,000 people in Canary Wharf talking about changing all that up. It's, it'll be... Yeah, I think in the heat of battle at the moment, there's a lot of talk about what it will look like, and the reality is there's still a lot of people in businesses who love the cut and thrust of an office environment, and there's people who want that more flexibility, and I think there'll be a sort of middle ground that we'll see people work towards. But is everyone going to be in a massive office all the time and exactly the same way as it's worked for years? Probably not. But I think it's important to think and listen to everyone. And I love what you're doing there about keeping the sort of culture alive.
Yeah. Just
tell me a little bit about this, as a sort of business owner in this space and at this time. What are some of the sort of concerns that you're looking at? What's keeping you up and on your mind? You seem pretty relaxed at the moment.
Yeah, I'm very relaxed. We're very lucky, really. I mean, the nature of the business that we run. I mean, I've got a friend who runs a software company that sells to airline industries to help them run their regulatory and compliance reporting, and he just sold it. And
just before,
well, he'd shaken a hand on a deal, and then guess what? The guy pulled out. I've got another friend that runs an events software as a service company. They were doing about $60,000 a month. They were doing in revenue, and that's now 5. Because overnight, guess what? People aren't holding events anymore. Yeah,
I heard someone who in exactly the same, might even be the same company, where they talked about a sort of 95% drop in revenue literally overnight, which is extraordinary, isn't it?
Yeah. So, I think before I go on to talk about what keeps me awake at night, I need to contrast it against the fact that we're all right.
Yeah.
My team are healthy and happy.
Yeah.
My business, we haven't had to make use of any of the government grants or anything. It is very much. In fact, I was talking to someone just before this call, and they were like, "You've been busy." I was like, "Busy? I've never been so busy in my entire life." Like, we're doing a couple of RFPs at the moment. We've got some really big clients knocking on our door. Because of this accelerator thing, that's opened a load of doors. I can basically email people at these asset management firms, and they actually get back to me now. As opposed to there's nothing keeping me awake at night, and I suppose maybe that's the answer to the question. Nothing, because compared to what some other people are going through who are currently unemployed, or their businesses are shut down, or those poor directors. I say poor directors. you know, there are certain people out there that are going to say, well, you know, screw those guys and girls because they were playing the system, you know, the ones that were taking the dividends and not necessarily taking it as self-employed, and they're not PAYE either. So they've now fallen through the gaps. Guess what?
Yeah.
You've gone from earning a load of money to nothing, potentially.
Yeah.
And the government isn't going to give you anything because you were playing the game. And I played that game. So I'm not sat here saying that it wouldn't have impacted me if my business, I would have been, like most people, I take PAYE up to the maximum amount and I would have been furloughed on 80% of that, which wouldn't have been. So before I talk about anything that keeps me awake, I don't think there's anything going wrong. Like, I haven't lost, touch wood, a loved one, or even a loved one of a loved one, you know. So I'm certainly not going to sit here and say woe is me, but what keeps me awake at night is nothing. But if you force me to sit here and think about, you know, what am I nervous about for the future, I suppose, it's how, you know, how we maintain some of the niceties that I've seen come about as a result of COVID. When I go out for a run every day and I jump off the pavement into the road to avoid someone, they smile and say thank you, whereas before I would have passed them and not even made eye contact. Right? When I go into the shops now, despite it being a bit awkward and everyone kind of trying to follow a one-way system, people are generally quite pleasant, and the people that I talk to behind the counter respect the fact that that's maybe the only human interaction that person's had today. So they really do seem to make an effort in their comms. And
it's fascinating, isn't it?
Right? So there's been, you know, again, trying to flush the good out from the bad. I feel there's been a huge amount of kindness. Like, I can't even quantify it. It's just huge. People are so much nicer all the time. And I suppose my fear is that we will get out the other side of this. A vaccine will be developed. Of course it will, because there's money to be made on it. So there will be. And of course we want a vaccine because we want to stop it, just like we want to stop all the other big diseases in the world, Ebola, HIV and all of that, right? So there has to be a vaccine for this. That's the real kind of get out of jail free card on it. But what I'm nervous about is that people will resort to
BAU, go back to the same. And
I didn't like it. I didn't like getting on the train with a load of grouchy people every day. I didn't, you know, like going up to London to meet with clients. I didn't like spending all day in London being forced into face-to-face meetings because that's the right thing to do. It made me into a slightly less thoughtful and less kind person. And actually, over the last 2 months, all I've thought about is how grateful I am that, given how awful everything is, people are being like, we had the VE Day celebrations on Friday. I met neighbours I've not met, and I've lived in that cul-de-sac for 2 years. There's a 93-year-old gentleman who lives around the corner. Like, I could literally put a stone through his window from my garden if I wanted to. Didn't even know he's there. His name's Alf, and he went through the war, and he's lived in my little cul-de-sac since 1960. Had it not been for the fact that we were all in lockdown, so we couldn't have our families over, VE Day happened to coincide, and we all ended up in the street, socially distanced, obviously, I would never have met this old guy. And do you know what? He might have been wheeled out, you know, in a box before I got to meet him. And that would have been a real shame. So there's a real sense of community now in my little cul-de-sac. And I think that everyone is starting to see that everywhere. And I just hope to God that that doesn't fade away when we defeat this thing ultimately.
Simon, it's a fascinating conversation, and one which I could last for hours and hours on, but we'll run out of tape, so a proverbial tape. I'm going to ask you one last question before we sign off, which is, on the flip side of that, you know, and I'm pleased to hear that the business is going well and you're good, and I absolutely agree with you about some of the things there that which we need to keep. But on the positive side, tell me about the ambitions. Where do you want to go with all of this? What's the upside and for the business?
So I think I'd like to, going back to what we were talking about earlier, really, I'd quite like to be responsible, not just for creating a great culture and in hiring people that are hardworking and looked after and getting our B Corp status and like, because there's a responsibility on me as an employer to do right by the people that work for me and to set a good example. So my ambition is that I think I've done a good job of that, and I want to maintain that as we scale. And I know people that have got businesses 20 times as big as mine in terms of annual revenue, and they've been able to keep that cultural, you know, perfection, if you like. So my ambition on the operational side, if you like, is to, as we grow, which we will now almost inevitably do as a result of where we are and the fact that we know that we're going to make more sales and all that, I've got to maintain that. Steve Blank, a guy who wrote 4 Steps to an Epiphany, which was then kind of copied by a guy called Eric Ries, said culture is a bit like ice cream. If there's a speck of poo in it, no one wants to eat it. And I think that's, you know what I mean? Yeah.
One I haven't heard before, but one I'm definitely using again.
You know what I mean? No, like, as lovely as that ice cream bowl might look, you don't want any of it if there's a bad bit in it, right? So, so that's a challenge, but it's one that I'm up for because I want to be one of the best employers in the country. I feel like we've done a good job getting where we are, but there's always more to do. And then, of course, you've got to make money and you've got to continue to grow. You can't continue to have those aspirations operationally if you don't make more money. And on the making money side, I want to make money by adding value, and I want to continue to do that by, at a very low and basic level, going in and finding spreadsheets and eradicating them. But I think at a more kind of macro strategic level, I want to work with these amazing clients that we've got and take on more amazing clients and help them to have their BAU operational stuff so ship-shape that they then can use their data to build incredible MI and business intelligence and create products that are sustainable, that are bought by people who care about sustainability, that have a net positive on the world. I don't want people sitting there schlepping through data and being employed solely for that. Technology should be solving those problems and automating those issues away from us so that the people, and you could get into a whole thing about universal basic income, because when these companies are so automated that they don't need the, and that's a big story, and you would absolutely run out of real tape. But I do want to be a net positive. It isn't. We're not just flogging software, enterprise level software, because we think we can make a few quid on it. We're building solutions that allow these companies to get away from the manual and boring stuff, and maybe give their staff opportunities to focus on things that do the company good. And then, if it's the right type of company, that company will in turn do the world some good. So it's a bit like the butterfly effect, you know what I mean? Like we should be, that for me is what we're doing. We're helping everyone to kind of step up.
Purpose-driven business, and which drives great culture. I love to hear it. It's it's so refreshing. I've loved this conversation, and it's great to see a business that's sort of doing well through this first and foremost, but also a business which is really looking after its people. I think it's really refreshing to hear. And it's credit to you and the team, which sounds absolutely fantastic. And I look forward to getting to know it a lot more over the
good
as well.
I appreciate
Simon, it's been lovely speaking to you. Thanks so much for joining us. And look, if anyone's there watching at the moment and saying they want to get in touch with you, what's the best way of doing that?
Simon, I don't really like social media. It gives me anxiety. So simon.swords@fundipedia.com. If you search for Simon Swords, you'll find me. It's a pretty unique name.
Good name, powerful name.
Yeah, a little bit. It's Irish, I think. So Simon. So if you Google me, you'll find me. I'm and happy to talk to anyone about anything, either technology, financial, philosophy, you name it. As you can tell, I'm a bit chatty. So.
Well, Simon, always love that. It's good to have a chatty person on the show. Thanks so much for joining us and getting in touch and reaching out. And listen, thanks to all of you guys for watching as well. We'll see you soon on another episode of Fintech Focus TV. Simon, thanks a lot.
Thank you.